Girl Club, get your tea and your popcorn because this is gonna be a good one. Welcome back to the Creepy Article series. So, the Exoticals have been out here in these YouTube streets saying that YouTuber Blunt Girly, who is an ex worker from Oakland who has now tried to turn, I guess, trad wife or red pill, they're saying that ex worker Blunt Girly is talking about the Exoticals. And so I decided that we're going to go ahead and spill some tea over here on the exotical side so we can have a little cackle. But I want to talk about the concept of unambiguous women who latch on to the exotical space because at the end of the day, they wish they could relate to our privilege. They wish that they could have the cultural capital that we have. And so I've noticed this on YouTube. So, like before the exoticals came onto the scene, most unambiguous women spent their time complaining and competing with exoticals. Most people want to date us, create us, or they want to live like us. We are basically their standard of living. We are the standard of social climbing. And so, one of the side effects of that is oftentimes, as an exotical, you will have these unambiguous women who try to come into your life and they'll try to pretend like they really like you or they support you. You know, this happened with Blunt Girly a couple years ago. She used to be very heavy in the exotical space. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is just go back on my YouTube channel, just scroll back. I literally have hundreds of videos where you will see her all up in the comments section. You know, even if you scroll back on her channel, you'll see all of her videos and how she has been heavily inspired by the exotical community. And has anyone noticed that unambiguous Black women will say things like they're the blueprint, but if you look at their content on YouTube, a lot of their current content is actually inspired by the exotical sector because one of the side effects is we basically created this pretty privileged niche where, you know, we talk about what it's like and the types of perks that we get for being exoticals. But I've noticed that one of the things Blunt Girly has done is she doesn't want her audience to know that she was actually engaged in X work. She would go to men's houses, she would cuddle with them, she would do phone sex, etc. And by the way, I do not shame people who are ex workers. We have ex workers in the exotical community. I don't care what people do to make their money or whatever. I never judged Blunt Girly for that. But what I want to talk about is how a lot of unambiguous women, one of their social climbing mistakes is they try to lie and pretend as if they never engaged in a certain lifestyle. And part of why they do that is so they can compete with exoticals. They want the level of social status that we have. And so they'll try to change their tune, kind of like what Blunt Girly has done, where, you know, she wants to promote this content where she's talking about her billionaire biracial husband who doesn't exist. She lies about having a husband. She lies about having a biracial husband. She even tried to record somebody saying that she's pretty in order for her to prove that she has pretty privilege. You don't see exoticals doing stuff like this because we don't have to seek validation from other people in the same way that somebody like Blunt Girly would have to. But for those of you who wanted the proof that this is true, here's the email right here. I actually did an X Work series a couple years ago on this channel, and Blunt Girly was one of the main focuses of that series, but I didn't say it at the time because she didn't want me to say it. She didn't want anybody to know that she has done X Work. And I find it interesting how unambiguous women, they can dish it out, but they can't take it back. So they expect you as the exotical, they want you to protect their image, but then they don't want to protect the exotical's image. Have you ever noticed this narcissistic rage that they have in the unambiguous community when they see you growing, when they see that you still have a members page that's thriving, when they see you've got a thriving Patreon, when they see that you have still been consistent and, you know, they've been stagnant for years, and then they have to keep changing their talking points as Blunt Girly has done. She literally went from being a part of the exotical space, talking about pretty privilege as an unambiguous woman. She went from being kind of this exotical ally to now trying to, I guess, make money off of maybe like the red pill space or be like this trad wife. So she keeps on trying to flip her talking points. And so, you know, I was a casualty of that. In order for her to successfully flip her talking points into being a trad wife, she had to come against me because I make decentering men content. But anybody who actually knows me knows that I don't really care what lifestyle the exoticals are living. What I care about the most is us having a safe space. What I care about is the exoticals tapping into their privilege. We actually have plenty of exoticals in this space who are married. There are some exoticals where they're married, they have kids. Some of them are even red pill adjacent from what I've seen. So that was never I never really cared about what YouTube channel somebody watches. What kind of content creator gets mad because somebody's watching a YouTube channel? That's very weird to me. I always thought it was weird and strange and cult like that people would get mad if their followers are watching certain YouTube channels. I've never really been like that. I don't really care what channels the exoticals choose to watch. But one thing we're not going to do in the exotical space is we're not going to stay silent. And I think that as this channel has become bigger and as other exoticals have kept making content, sometimes the smaller YouTubers, they think that we won't respond, or they feel like we're too big to say something now. We're too busy to be creepy articles, and that's not the case. I will forever be a YouTube troll. But here's the email from Blunt Girly. It was sent on August 21st, 2024 at 4:08 p.m. So if she tries to deny that she sent this email, well, here's the screenshot right here. Okay? And you know that it's true because this is actually her former logo that she used to have. Actually, she might still have this same logo today. Hold on, let me screenshot it. But you can see that that's her email name. That's my email name. And she says, "Hey girl, please keep me anonymous and blur out my name. Isn't it interesting how you've got an unambiguous woman who wants the exoticals to protect her image? She wants the exoticals to keep her anonymous, but according to the creepy articles, she has been actively trying to search for exoticals. She's been doxing exoticals for months now, or attempting to dox exoticals for months. So do you see the hypocrisy there? Oh, please keep me anonymous and blur out my name, but then she doesn't want to do that when it comes to the exotical space. She says, I keep this secret close with me, so only you know this, but I trust your character. But I thought us exoticals were just a bunch of liars and frauds and grifters. So here on this email, you have Blunt Girly saying, Exoticals United, I trust your character. I know you're a good person. So where's that narrative now? She says, I'm so ready to tell my story. Believe it or not, I wasn't an ex-worker as far as selling my cat, but I did a form of it in my opinion. So she's still admitting that she's doing X work. She said, I did a form of it in my opinion. X working is a spectrum. It's not black and white, and that's what I'm about to get into. For example, even sugar babies is a form of X work. Selling feet pics online, it's a form of X work. Anytime you're in a direct transactional situation with a man, paying for your body in any capacity, in my opinion, that's a form. There are many genres. So this is the same YouTuber who's now attempting to talk about kind of like being classy and, being this feminine woman. And I find it interesting too, because she tries to clout chase off of whatever YouTuber is up and coming. She will temporarily align herself with that YouTuber. She'll temporarily agree with their talking points. She might try to live stream with those YouTubers, or maybe you'll see her in their comment section. But eventually she's going to try to flip to another talking point. Whatever will keep her relevant, because she doesn't have a passionate audience. She doesn't really have like a really strong core audience like how the exoticals do. Like over on this side of YouTube, there are women who are naming their channels after my channel. There are women who are subscribing to actual members pages for Pretty in Between, myself, the exotic brown skin, the black exotical. So we have an entire economy over here in the exotical sector. So we actually don't have to have a lot of subscribers in order to like be relevant and make an income. But as far as Blunt Girly, because she doesn't really have much of a core audience, she has to flip from, whatever's trending at the time. She'll just ride their bandwagon in hopes that she can attain relevance on YouTube. And I'm using her as an example because we do see this in the unambiguous community a lot. They ride the coattails of whatever community is popular. So you had, it's very similar to how they had like the divesting movement, the swirling movement. They had the hypergamy movement. So it's just like whatever they think will get them more social status, they're willing to do it. So that, a lot of them are just extremely desperate. But she said, due to pretty privilege, men would pay me hundreds to cuddle with them. So she's basically admitting right here that this is, she's in transactional relationships with men. So to go from being a professional cuddler to these creepy men, think about the types of men that hire ex workers, especially in person. And by the way, Blunt Girly has talked about how dangerous her job has been before. I never really talked about this stuff on YouTube because I actually felt sorry for Blunt Girly. And so I didn't want to ruin her little bit of income that she is getting from her YouTube channel. I didn't want to destroy her brand or anything. So that's part of why I never came out and just put this out there when she first started trying to come for the exoticals. But after about, I don't know how long it's been now that she's been coming for exoticals, probably over a year now. So yeah, you're not going to be able to speak against women in the exotical space for that long without me doing anything. But think about the types of men that pay for a woman to come and lay in the bed with them. Usually these are extremely lonely, creepy, repulsive, incel, and reject types of men. And usually these types of men are creepy. So if somebody's paying me $200, which is that's what it said online when I looked up, what's the high end, how much would a high end cuddler get to go and lay in a random man's bed? Usually it's about $200. So imagine some creepy incel guy paying you $200. You drive across town so you can go to his house and lay there. Do you think that these are the types of men that are attractive? Do you think these are the types of men that are good at respecting women's boundaries? Usually, a man who's paying for something like that is extremely desperate. So I can only imagine the type of assault or SA or, the types of horrors that could have come from Blunt Girly's job laying in bed with random men. And also, this whole concept of, oh, can you keep me anonymous or like not tell anybody? It's interesting how she wants the exoticals to protect her image, but then if she gets mad or if she feels irrelevant or outshined by the exotical space, then she doesn't want to protect the exoticals' images, or she doesn't want to protect their privacy, or she's wanting people to go and bully these women. And by the way, this video is not created for you guys to just go and bully Blunt Girly. That's not the reason I'm creating this. I'm creating this because I'm actually exposing the psychology behind unambiguous women who ride the coattails of exoticals and then they get upset when it doesn't work out for them. But she says, here's what I learned. When it comes to tricks, aka men who pay for services from women, it's mainly incels or rejects of society that turn to that route, and they do it for various reasons. So she's admitting that she didn't have the pretty privilege or the intelligence or the education or the resources to do anything else for work. She didn't have access to do anything else. So according to her own words, she was cuddling with, quote, incels or rejects of society. So does that sound glamorous to you? Does that sound like a leveled up, high class black woman to you? The type of woman that, she's hanging out with incels and rejects of society. And then she says, most women won't admit that, though, due to pride. They'll pretend to other girls that every guy they're dealing with are all billionaires and it's all perfect, and that's rarely the case. So notice how before she knew she would get exposed, she's actually revealing that most of these guys are also dusty. They're not millionaires and billionaires. These are not Jeffrey Epstein, and even if they were, would you really want to get paid $200? That's actually how much Mr. Schmepstein was paying women to essentially do similar work, cuddling or whatever while he jacks off. Because that's another thing. When you're a paid cuddler, you can control your body, but you can't control what he does with his body. So imagine cuddling in the bed under the covers with a man. Maybe he's not touching you. Maybe he's just touching himself. And you have to sit there and basically deal with it. And then they try to use semantics like, oh, but this is not X work. It doesn't really count. So she's putting herself on a hierarchy above other X workers like, oh, but, those women, they sell cat directly. They're prostitutes. I'm above them. I'm just cuddling. I'm just in the room with him while he jacks off. Or I'm just in the room with him, this incel or this reject. And then she's admitting right here in her own email that, they're not billionaires and stuff. That's rarely the case. These men are more like regular, everyday guys. They're everyday dusties. Because it's only $200. Most people can afford that. You could be in the ghetto somewhere and pay $200 to have someone come lay in the bed with you. Okay, so we already know that she is I guess you could call it a high level cuddler. High level is the $200 one. So she said that Everything that glitters isn't gold. So notice how she's re-emphasizing in her own story time to me. She's re-emphasizing that, hey, this is not glamorous. This is not something to aspire to. She says most tricks are men of all tax brackets, but the common theme is that they have poor financial skills and they like to trick off on random women. They're stupid in the head when it comes to life and money. And it's very common for them to do things like spend their family's rent money on an ex-worker. So this is the same woman who promotes, having values and attracting high value men and being a classy, unambiguous black woman. But she admits right here in this screenshot that she is actively participating in the financial demise of these incels and rejects. So she knows, okay, these guys are broke, they're dusty, they're bad with money. He's spending his rent money on cuddling with me. Or, I have to lay in the bed with him while he does God knows what. I have to feel his nasty, dirty dick on the back of my butt while I'm snuggling with him. Just so I can make $200. Such a classy blueprint. But she said, if you think about it, millionaires don't become millionaires by being financially dumb and doing things like that. So now she's reiterating again. She's actually exposing again. None of these men that she's with are millionaires because you don't become a millionaire by wasting $200 so you could get your D hard in the bed next to a random woman. She said smart workers know to never date a man that's willing to trick hundreds on a woman he doesn't know. And that's one of the many reasons. Those types of men are no good and will lead you down a ditch. Plenty of stories on Reddit that backs up what I'm saying. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're curious, please go look up professional cuddlers on Reddit because they have so much tea on there that they have spilled. There are so many horror stories of that on Reddit. Like women who are doing the same job that Blunt Girly was doing. She said, oh, and I'm speaking from experience. I have dated tricks. Look at this. I have dated tricks. Right there in the email. So she's admitting that those are the types of men that she's dated. So it's funny how when I said a while back, she doesn't have a husband. She most likely has a, like a pimp or live-in boyfriend or whatever. I didn't judge her for that because I really don't give a fuck. It's her life. But she's admitting from her own mouth in this email, I have dated tricks. There it is. Right there, folks. This is the woman that claimed to be around millionaires and billionaires when she got mad at the exoticals. But then here in the email, she just said that she wasn't around them. And she's also admitting that she has dated tricks. And she just described what a trick was a couple of sentences ago. Men who are gullible with money, they're bad with finances. So that's basically a dusty. I mean, if we're being honest, is it high value? Is that a high value man, the type of man that wastes his wealth away or spends his bill money on random women? Blunt Girly doesn't care because according to her own talking point, she says right here, I have dated tricks and learned my lesson the hard way. So she's admitting that, she tried to date these men. She dated these low value men who pay professional cuddlers and it didn't work. And also think about the level of desperation you have to have as a woman to date that type of man. So, you're doing your ex work, you're doing your cuddling, whatever. She just said that these are incels and rejects of society. She just admitted that. But then she also admits a couple of paragraphs later that she has dated these men. The ones that she just called rejects and incels. So that's a form of desperation. You can tell that Blunt Girly was clearly in a financially desperate situation. Or she was emotionally desperate for a man, which is even worse. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that she just wanted the finances. So how financially desperate do you have to be to the point where you're willing to actually date one of these nasty ass men just so you could survive, just so you could pay bills? You're just a girl from Oakland. You have no education. We have heard Blunt Girly talk shit about women who have graduated from college. She actually talks shit about me and she's like, oh, she graduated from college and she's doing content creation as if that's bad. As if having a media company where you're doing content creation is somehow bad. That's the mindset of an uneducated woman. So it's safe for me to say that, she was an uneducated girl from Oakland, according to her own talking points, and she was desperate enough financially to date tricks, according to her own words. So she dated the tricks, and then she got played by them because she said, oh, I learned my lesson the hard way. So these tricks are teaching her a lesson. So that's how bad this woman was at social climbing. And don't even get me started on her family background or, because some of the exoticals are saying that I guess on her content, she also called her family unattractive and said that, she's the only attractive one in her family. Okay, so think about the psychology of a woman who was raised by a jealous mother or an ugly, unattractive mother. We talk about that on this channel, medium ugly women. So Blunt Girly admitted on her own channel that she comes from a long line of medium ugly women or medium ugly men or dusty men. That's her family background according to her words. And now she's saying that she has dated tricks and basically, she got played by them. And then she said, most ex-workers will give that a shot at least once because he's spending on you. But then you'll see they are no good. They're terrible men to enter relationships with, and these men know that, which is why those men just pay for services with the women. They are all types of screwed up. So she's admitting she's dated these men who are all types of screwed up. This is the woman who is now trying to give dating advice and, telling black women, telling unambiguous black women why they're not worthy of dates and marriages, putting marriage on a pedestal. And it's hilarious how, people say that I'm extreme for making decentering men content. Well, this behavior is extreme. This is extremely male-centered. And, obviously it's a side effect of poverty as well. So, this whole act that she tried to put on where she's trying to make it like she comes from a suburban type of background or a suburban city. Anybody who's from the West Coast knows that Oakland is not the definition of suburbs with millionaires and billionaires. And I proved that on my last video that I made about this. But she said, during my cuddling sessions, clients loved chatting with me the entire time. And boy, did they not hold back. So now she's admitting that not only does she have to drive to these men's houses, who knows where these men live. They could live in the ghetto. She said that she dealt with men of all tax brackets. So, majority of people's tax bracket is poverty. Think about the economy we're in right now. Do you think that Blunt Girly, being from Oakland, and the type of men that would book an ex-worker from Oakland, do you think that they are millionaires and billionaires? Do you think she's driving to Beverly Hills or somewhere like that so she can get paid $200 to cuddle? No. So I'm going to assume that most of the time she was going to these regular, middle class to lower middle class houses in the Oakland area. So now she's cuddling with these creepy rejects and incels, according to what she said. And then she's saying that, they love chatting her ear off, basically yapping. So now you have to listen to this man yap. She said, what I learned is most men who turn to paying for services with women are struggling psychologically. So now she's admitting, okay, not only was I cuddling with random men, not only was I, getting paid on average up to $200 because I looked it up. That's usually what they pay. But I was talking to these creepy men and they are mentally ill. So how desperate do you have to be to the point where you're willing to drive across town to hang out with a mentally ill pervert? And he's not even rich. And he's creepy, probably smells bad. She called them the rejects of society. Do you know how desperate you have to be? So I find it interesting that, she's now trying to pretend as if she was never desperate. No, she is desperate. That's why she desperately tries to flip her talking points. She's desperate to be relevant on YouTube. Her desperation is totally different from the norm. Like, when you look at my content, do I want people to, go on the Patreon and stuff? Yes, I want people to follow the Patreon. I want people to follow the members page. But I will never be that desperate to where I have to go on YouTube and go from the exotical space to now being an unambiguous, pro-black unambiguous, to then talking about how I have dark skin and 4C hair, to then posting light skin pictures of myself, and then hiding behind a Blasian avatar of a mixed race woman, and then, going red pill or trying to promote this trad wife lifestyle. No, I will never have that level of desperation. But look at her level of desperation based on this sentence. She's admitting that the men that she was with were struggling psychologically. Would you go and hang out with a mentally ill man for $200? Because I wouldn't. I'm not willing to risk my life and be in the same room and be in his house, be in the home of a mentally ill man who is psychologically struggling just so I could make $200? She said every last one of my clients had some type of mental problem going on. So now she's admitting not only was it just a one-off experience, oh, this one guy's a perv. No, Blunt Girly is admitting in this sentence right here, every single one of her clients. So imagine doing this full time. Maybe you do one client a day, maybe it's, so if you have 30 clients per month, you do one client per day. You're getting paid $200 to hang out with 30 mentally ill men. She says every last one of my clients had some type of mental problem going on. Most had a form of diagnosed social anxiety or social awkwardness, personality disorders, mental illness, or were neurodivergent, etc. Okay, so snuggling in bed with autistic, he's got autism, he's got Asperger's, he's bipolar, he's got narcissistic personality disorder, he's got schizophrenia. Would you drive across town and snuggle in the bed with this type of man? And by the way, is there a dress code for cuddling? Because even if you are fully clothed when you're cuddling with these men, there's no guarantee that he's fully clothed. He could be naked in the bed next to you. So would you snuggle up with some fat beluga, because most men are overweight in the United States. So would you snuggle up with an overweight, bootylicious male who also has a personality disorder for $200? And also, since Blunt Girly wanted to throw shade against other women who do X work, since she wanted to put X work on a hierarchy, well, if you're really that pretty and that gorgeous, you really don't have to even touch these men. You really could have just done OF and just, posted some pretty pictures and been kind of like Ruby Rose or somebody like that, or like Cardi B or something. You really could have just done that. So I find it interesting how on her channel, she's currently putting down different types of women who have a history of doing X work, or, maybe they come from a similar background to herself. She's putting down women who come from that social type of background, but she couldn't swing it as an OF girl. She couldn't swing it. She had to go and be a professional cuddler in person. That's the best she could do. That's the highest she could make it. And to this day, she is hiding behind her mixed race Blasian avatar while simultaneously trying to talk about exoticals. Meanwhile, all the exoticals that she's trying to dox, or, all the women that she has showed that are supposed to be us, those women are actually gorgeous. Those women are actually very beautiful. Those women really could make money off of this without having to touch any man or lay in the bed with a bootylicious bipolar white man. So isn't it interesting how she has changed her tune from today all the way back to this email in August of 2024, where she's really spilling the real tea. But she says, I am sexy but a nerd behind closed doors, and I am into neuroscience, so I make sure to find out that information. Anybody who's truly into neuroscience would never engage in something that could destroy their mental health. And they wouldn't engage so closely with mentally ill people. So I can tell that this sentence right here is a lie now that I'm looking back at it. But she says, I even ask about other girls they're paying. So here's the tea. Wait a minute. She just admitted she even asks about other girls. So even in the midst of her ex work, she is so insecure that she will ask these mentally ill men, hey, what kind of other girls are you paying? What other girls do you cuddle with, sir? What's your type? Do you cuddle with light-skinned girls? Do you cuddle with white girls? Do you like fat girls? Do you like BBWs? What about the other girls? So she can't even just get her money and go. She is oozing with insecurity so badly to the point where she just admitted in her own email to me that she asked these men about the other girls because, she wants to compare. Why would somebody ask about what other girls a man is seeing, especially a repulsive, mentally ill incel and reject, according to her own words? Why do you care what the incel likes? Why do you care what this reject is, what he's doing when you're not there? Why do you care what other women he's talking to and what other ex-workers he's hiring? Do you see how male-centered that is? This girl is so desperate for these men's validation that she can't even just go there and just shut up and then just take her money and get out. She has to go there and then compare herself to the other professional cuddlers of Oakland. She said, what I learned is that these men's sexual appetite is pretty crazy, and they pay for services with women, to be honest, about their dark, twisted, and sick fantasies. Many people think that those men are paying for regular smegs, and that's rarely the case. So how would she know all this, right? That means she's either asking these men about it, she's asking for details about this man's sex life. These incels and rejects, that's how desperate she is for, knowledge about men. And think about the type of woman who is so misguided to where she even has to do this in the first place. She probably didn't have a mother who really taught her, or a father who really taught her to social climb, or, she most likely didn't have any parents who are active in her life. Because if you are a parent who truly cares about your daughter, you wouldn't want your daughter to be so desperate for $200 that she's, driving all the way across town so she can get in bed with random men. My father would never approve of me doing something like that. My parents would give me the $200 if I was that desperate. My parents would rather just give me the $200 themselves rather than allowing me to put my whole life in danger. So this is actually sad, so that, like I said, that's part of why I never responded and read this email. I never read the email again and analyzed it because I was like, I didn't want to destroy what little she had. But since she has apparently been going behind the Exotical's back this entire time, and since she was never genuine, and apparently, hates the Exotical so much that she wants to try to destroy our space, well, that's not going to work. So, now it's going to get exposed. But she said, that's what men go to regular women for. Men go to their girlfriends or wives that are going to judge and shame them for regular smegs. Men turn to ex-workers or to transactional services to finally unleash their dark fantasies that they never told anyone, or that their girlfriends or wives would look at them crazy and judge them for, or even call the cops on them for. And remember, she is the one that is in the bed with these men. So she's admitting these types of men who pay for women like her, they're not normal and they don't want to do anything normal. So I can only imagine the types of disgusting things that she had to do with these men. Even if she's not putting the guy's D inside of her, just imagine the nasty stuff that you may have to do. Like we've heard about like poop gate and stuff like that, how men will like shit on women or they pee on women or, so yeah, of course you're going to try to say, oh, well, but we didn't have snacks. We didn't, he didn't go inside of me. Okay, but he peed on you. He shat on you. He literally, so that if anything, that's even worse. But she's admitting that these men have dark and twisted fantasies, the exact men that she's at their houses. She's driving over there from Oakland so she can go to their houses. And then she says that some of these things that these men want to do, they would get the cops called on them for. So what is that? Assaulting women, hitting women, I don't know, spitting on women. So just imagine the types of things that Blunt Girly has had to do during these cuddling sessions so she can make an extra buck. And she's admitting that regular women wouldn't be willing to do this. And by the way, what does that say about herself? What does that say about her own desperation for the male gaze, male approval, and also just for a couple $100? But she said, that's why I tell women to listen to men when they are being brutally honest, even if it's not what you want to hear. Would you rather them lie? Would you rather find out the hard way when he's terrorizing your family? This is valuable info you need to know. So zip it and sit pretty and nod your head and watch the craziest things fly out of his mouth. So she's admitting that she will tolerate a man saying or, basically treating her any kind of way so that she can make her little money. Because remember, she's not rich. She backtracked after I called her out a while back when she claimed that she was around millionaires and billionaires. Then she tried to backtrack and say, oh, I never said that. Okay, so you went through all of this just to still be middle class. You went through all this drama to be middle class. Making fun of people for getting a college education and creating a social media business, yet you were over here doing this just to be middle class. Make that make sense. So she said, women are always surprised when they find out the men they're dealing with is doing disturbing things like touching their daughter or doing something sick. If they would stop reacting emotional and listen, men eventually tell on themselves when they're comfortable enough. So now she's admitting that, hey, it's normal for these types of men to be touching their daughters and doing sick things. So stop reacting. Look at her sentence right here. She says, if they would stop reacting emotional and listen, men eventually tell on themselves. So, hey, just sit back and wait for this man to tell you that he's touching your daughter. Just sit back and wait for this man to expose himself as being a schmedophile. And by the way, she's admitting these are the men that she's cuddling with. These are the men that she's around. So convicted ex-offenders. Convicted offenders. Cuddling with them. And doing God knows what else. And she's just sitting over here in this email talking like it's just nothing. So I find it interesting that these women tried to say, oh, well, Exoticals United was just being parasocial, or, she had too much expectations. This is just YouTube. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so then this is YouTube and I'm doing whatever I want now. You want to come against the exotical space for several years on end, then you will be treated the same way that I treat Chrissy or other women. I will use your own words to tell your story, or I will use screenshots to prove my point then. So she's admitting that these are the types of men she's around, literal ex-offenders. Girl from Oakland who's supposed to be, I guess, classy or whatever, millionaires and billionaires, yet you have to spend your time snuggled up with ex-workers, literally laying in bed with the enemy. So she says, don't be the woman that finds out these things the hard way, like most. You'll realize a lot early on by being a sexy listening ear for him. So now you should just be a sexy listening ear for these ex-offenders. You should just be a listening ear, and that's going to keep you safe. Just be in bed with the ex-offender. Just be in bed with this mentally ill man who's an incel and a reject and is psychologically disturbed. Just be in the bed with him, and then that's going to protect you, Blunt Girly says. She says, also, here's some game. If he's willing to trick on a random ex-worker, those types of men have no limits and are capable of doing anything. I notice these men don't have a limit and will F a dog. I am not lying. So keep an eye around for your children, and if you find out he's into paying for random workers. So how would she know that they're into effing animals? Oh, because she was an ex-worker who was literally in the room with these men. So she's hiding behind this term cuddler, or she's just like, oh, I was just cuddling with him. Okay, cuddling while he's doing what? Does that man have a puppy? Is he, essaying the animal? Or are you having to sit there and witness the essay of an animal? So this is the background that this girl comes from, according to her own words. And she had no problem with me actually making content about this a couple years ago. But the point of my content back then was never to try to analyze her or, expose her in any way. But yeah, let's analyze this now. Since other people want to try to analyze the exoticals, let's analyze these talking points. She literally admits she's around men who will F animals and doesn't care. No big deal. I'll hang out with these incels and rejects who essay animals. She says, anyway, during my cuddling sessions, they would always ask for extra requests during these sessions because most of the other girls that did that were actual undercover prostitutes, and I was not. I would not have intercourse, so usually I decline any odd request. So here she is again saying, hey, I'm not as bad as a prostitute. What is it with women who are trying to put themselves on a hierarchy as an ex-worker? Oh, well, I'm not as bad as the women who are actually giving cat. Okay, but your cat is still inches away from his D. And then you're literally admitting that these men are the type that will essay animals and their own daughters. And then you're laid up in bed with an ex-offender. So is that any better? Like, she's trying to make it like, oh, well, at least I'm not a prostitute. And then she says, here it goes. One married but separated man asked me to pee on him, spit my food in his mouth or drink, and another guy asked me to kick and step on his balls and dominate him. Another guy had an extreme foot fetish and asked to suck my toes, etc. One asked me to beat him until he is bruised. So, quote unquote, cuddling. This is what you're going to be doing, ladies. If you ever become a professional cuddler, just know that this is what they're going to be requesting. Blunt Girly just told you. So it sounds innocent on the surface. It sounds like, oh, I'm just, sitting there next to a man. No, you're sitting there watching him essay animals, or he could already be an offender, because who knows if they do background checks. I mean, if you can't even afford to make $200 any other way, do you really think these women can afford to do background checks on the men that they're working with? All these men where they're driving across town to quote unquote cuddle. Meanwhile, she just admitted that they have other requests. She says, they're very backwards because in front of society, I think men go along with their expectations of the man being dominant partner while the women are being submissive. Behind closed doors and with ex-workers, everything is flipped. Most men turn to ex-work to get dominated by women. I never had a client that wanted me to be submissive. So now she's saying I'm also a dom, when I'm with these men. Okay, so that's no longer just cuddling, ma'am. You're not cuddling, you're also doing other stuff, which I had never judged before. But now we're going to analyze it. So she says, that's boring. It wouldn't be out of the blue to ask a normal woman for that. Men go to ex workers to escape societal pressures and for an out of the box experience. So she's admitting, I am these men's escape. I'm his escape. I'm his different experience. I'm not like other girls, and I'm not like those prostitutes. Oh no. I'm an out of the box experience. And then she says, however, out in public, all of these men would be the most masculine presenting ever, with the most masculine jobs, voice, etc. Police, military, Bob the Builder. So she's admitting that these are literal men in uniform. These are men in uniform that she's doing this work for. So classy, such a trad wife. And then she said, also, the way I look may have had something to do with them wanting me to dominate them. I'm black, so who knows? And by the way, she did say, previously she did admit that she is unambiguous. She's dark skinned. She has 4C hair, broad featured. That's what she was saying when she was over here in the exotical space. Now, apparently, she is posting pictures where she's claiming that it's her and it's like a light skinned person or whatever, or, it's somebody with a very bright skin tone. That's not what she was saying when she was over in the exotical space. We all knew that she was unambiguous and we didn't care because we support whoever supports us. But yeah, now she's singing a different tune. So, who knows what she's saying about herself now. But she said, I've also had straight men confess the craziest things that I can't repeat. One guy was basically down low and would sleep with men and nobody knew. His wife didn't know. It was his dirty little secret. He only told me that he used to suck other men's peen behind closed doors. And these men were coming from websites. Actually, most men who are willing to pay for a service from a worker have no limit. And I actually noticed that basically all of them would also deal with trans or other men. So she's saying, hey, I was cuddled up with ex-workers, DL guys, and abusive men, and men who touch their daughters, according to this email right here. She says, that's why I said, if you find that your man is into ex-workers, huge red flag. So this is blunt Girly, an ex-worker herself, admitting, if your man is into ex-workers, that is a red flag. She said, do not have kids with him. They have no limit, and I'm going to leave it at that. Use your head when I say that. Those types will screw anything. Keep a close eye on your kids. I have a way of making men so comfortable that they confess everything to me. So now Blunt Girly is saying, I'm proud of how comfortable I make these ex-workers and incels and rejects. I'm so proud of how I make them confess everything. These men tell me all their nasty stuff, and then I just stay in the bed and cuddle with them. Hashtag blueprint, hashtag level up. She says, I don't even think other ex-workers know the info that I know. I'm sure what I'm saying is even shocking for them to hear. Being an intellect and sexy, it's two powers working together. So she's saying, hey, I'm smart. Because these men, these nasty men, confess all these gross things that they do. They're confessing it to me because I'm Blunt Girly. She said, anyway, one guy would always vent about how resentful he was of his wife because most men only get married to please society. Every man that I talked to had the exact same story. Marriage is mainly what women crave. This man told me that he was young and felt like he couldn't do any better and wanted to please his parents because his parents wouldn't accept him. So even though he wasn't attracted to the wife, she was fat, and he never truly loved her, he settled with the first thing that liked him and got married anyway to fit in with society. And also because he was young and broke at that time when he got married and felt like he wasn't getting any better. He, as well as other men, would tell me that I was the dream woman that they actually wanted. So Blunt Girly actually believes these men when they say, you're my dream girl. It's like, ma'am, you're an ex-worker and he just paid you to come and be in his house. Of course he's going to say, you're my real dream girl. I really wanted an unambiguous ex-worker who's laid up with ex-offenders. Oh yeah, you're my dream girl. She says, I took care of myself from the inside out. I am young, slim, tall, cooperative, and bubbly, etc. I was also non-judgmental, so men always felt comfortable telling me what they wouldn't tell their wife. Anyway, the common theme with dealing with married men is that their main complaint was the wife had got very fat over the years and out of shape and let herself go. So notice how she's kind of implying, I'm more desirable than these men's wives. These ex-workers and rejects and incels, I'm more desirable. So she's still admitting that even in the midst of her ex-work, she's asking these men, hey, what other types of women do you like? So that's already a form of self-comparison now that I'm looking back at it. And then she's saying, I'm young and slim, tall. She did say that she was about 5'6". I don't consider that to really be tall, but I guess it is kind of tall. So she's got that slim boob job body type or whatever. So she's saying, oh, I'm young, I'm slim, I'm tall, and I'm cooperative. Notice how she emphasizes that. I'm cooperative and bubbly. And then she says, I was also non judgmental, so men always felt comfortable telling me what they wouldn't tell their wife. So notice how, again, she's putting herself on a hierarchy saying, I'm more in the know with these men than their own wives. Do you see how completely opposite that is of her content today? On her content, she's promoting, oh, well, you should be the wife, whatever. But here she's saying, oh, excuse me, I know more about these men than their own wives because I was an expert. I was an ex-worker cuddled up in bed with them. She said, the common theme dealing with married men is that their main complaint was that the wife had got very fat over the years and out of shape and let herself go. Never wearing makeup or getting dressed, always fighting and bickering. Every single time, it was the exact same storyline. Very textbook situation for men. I would ask these guys, does your wife know about your dark fantasies and everything you're telling me? The answer would always be, nope, she has no idea, not even a clue. In the world, these are regular men. Most men have to put up an act 24/6. When I was in the industry, so now she's admitting here, not only was she cuddling, she was in the industry in general. And remember, at the beginning of this email, she did say she did phone sex or whatever, like her doing different things over the phone, and then also doing, I guess I would call this a version of like escorting, going to men's houses and kind of hanging out or cuddling, whatever, they ask for all these different requests. So really, you're going to a man's house not knowing what you're going to be doing. But she says, when I was in the industry, it makes you second guess marriage. It's all a performance and an act. So this is currently a pro-marriage YouTuber. But here on the email to me, back when she was, snuggled up in the exotical space, back when she was an exotical ally, she's saying, no, this makes you second guess marriage. Marriage is a performance and an act. Do you see how opposite that is of her talking points today? She says, men rarely marry the women they are truly attracted to. Okay, so she's admitting that if a man wants to marry you, you're kind of like more of a convenience or whatever, you're not really who he's attracted to. But if you go on her channel today, she's talking about how a lot of black women need to become more marriageable. She says most aren't really into romance as much as women. Most marry the woman that's convenient, at least while they're young. Usually when he's older with more resources, that's the women he wants. And Blunt Girly is implying that this is herself, of course, because she is the ex-worker. She said every last one of them had the exact same story. It was textbook. They were young when they got married, and they only got married due to pressure of family, and those are the men that cheat the most. Never ever pressure your man into marriage unless you want him to cheat the entire time with transactional women. I would only recommend women getting married if the man is really in love and excited to marry you without pressure from you or his family. At least try to avoid situations like this, and he's the one that's always bringing it up, which is rare. Also, many men tell me that I really understand well how men think. My experience is partially why. So now she's validating herself based on men's validation. She's saying, these men that I did X work with, they tell me that I understand men. So therefore, I understand men. And then she says, I'll never tell them though, because everything I told you is a secret. Nobody in my circle has no idea. I am very mysterious, and I carry myself with class, but people tell me that I have a lot of experience and wisdom for my age, and I'm very smart and on game about life, and I keep it at that. I try to help women understand and give advice, but they don't listen and get angry at me because I keep it real. I notice that women need to work on controlling their emotional reactions. So, if you're around ex-offenders and pervs and rejects and incels, as what she just admitted she was around, men who want to be with animals, etc. Oh no, you got to control your emotional reactions, she says in this sentence. This is how you get your way in situations. Getting offended over everything is the quickest way for men to turn to the nice, easygoing, and understanding ex-worker, everything she's not at home. So this is Blunt Girly over here in the exotical space a couple years ago. This is this series that I originally did. It was based on kind of like decentering men and the reasons why you should. And so I was interviewing ex-workers, And Blunt Girly volunteered herself to be one of the ex workers that I interview. So, but here she's saying, all these men are going to do is turn to ex workers like me. And, she's saying that the ex workers know the real him while you're completely clueless and end up blindsided when he does something traumatic to the family, and scratching your head, controlling your emotions is smart. I'm so happy you're doing this series. So she's talking to me now, Exoticals United, I'm so happy you're doing this series because when a woman who's been in the industry talks, like me, Blunt Girly, it's very smart to listen up and take notes. And then she says, by the way, I put this behind me. I don't cuddle anymore. And that is because she is now trying to become a full-time YouTuber. She's trying to do her thing and I guess do the opposite talking points now, putting on this act as if she is such an expert about being a trad wife. And by the way, for those of you who think I'm lying about the whole skin tone thing, well, here is a picture that she had posted showing her quote-unquote skin tone. Back when she was with us, when she was an exotical ally, she admitted to us that she is not an exotical. She said, hey, I'm a dark-skinned black woman with 4C hair, broad features, but here she is, looking very light. And by the way, the only reason I even have this picture is because one of the creepy articles emailed it to me. And they were asking me like, hey, isn't this the same Blunt Girly who was an exotical ally? And she said she was a dark-skinned black woman. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comments section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.